The stars belonged to the old ones. At least that was what they said. For 50,000 years, the Galactic Concordat had ruled everything they could see. 12 ancient species sat on the High Council. They made the rules. They divided the planets between themselves. They took what they wanted. No one could stop them. Their ships were powerful. Their weapons could destroy worlds. They had technology that seemed like magic. Every species in the galaxy either served them or feared them. The Concordat kept peace, but it was their kind of peace. If someone refused to obey, the Concordat sent warships. Those who fought back always lost. One day a Concordat scout ship found something new. A small yellow star near the edge of known space. 8 planets circled it. The 3rd planet had life. The scouts sent their report back to the council. They had found another species. These beings called themselves humans. They called their world Earth. The humans were young. They had just learned to travel between their planets. They had small stations orbiting their moon and Mars. Their ships were slow and simple. To the Concordat, humans looked like children playing with toys. The council looked at the reports and made their decision quickly. The Virex Empire wanted the Sol system. The Vrex were one of the strongest members of the Concordat. They had conquered hundreds of worlds before. Their commander, Admiral Kranoth, looked at the human system and saw riches. The outer planets had metals and gases that the Vrex needed. Earth itself did not matter much to them. The council agreed with the Vrex claim. Under Concordat law, humans had no rights. They were too primitive. They did not control enough space. They could not defend themselves. The law was clear. The Vrex could take the system. The humans could be moved somewhere else if the Vrex chose to allow it. Earth tried to talk with the Concordat. Human leaders sent messages. They offered friendship and trade. They asked for time to prove themselves. They wanted to show they could be good neighbors in the galaxy. The Concordat did not care. To them, humans were like insects asking to keep their nest. The council allowed one human delegation to speak. 5 humans traveled to the Concordat capital world. They stood before the 12 ancient species. The chamber was huge and cold. The council members looked down at the humans from high seats. Some council members did not even watch. They were bored. The lead human diplomat was named Sarah Chen. She spoke with passion about Earth and its people. She talked about human history, human dreams, and human rights. She asked the council to see humans as equals. She begged them to leave the Sol system alone. She promised humans would cause no trouble. Admiral Kranoth laughed at her. His voice was harsh and cruel. He told the humans they were nothing. He said the Vrex had destroyed species stronger than humans without trying. He called Earth a worthless rock with worthless people on it. The other council members said nothing. Some looked away. Others smiled. The council gave their final word. Humans had 10 standard cycles to leave the Sol system. That was about 3 Earth years. They could take their people and go somewhere else. They could find an empty world far away. If they refused to leave, the Vrex would remove them by force. The decision was final. There would be no more discussion. Sarah Chen stood very still. Her face showed no emotion. She looked at each council member carefully. Then she spoke one last time. Her voice was quiet but clear. She said humans would remember this day. She said the Concordat would regret their choice. Then she turned and walked out. The council members laughed again. The Vrex began to gather their fleet. Admiral Kranoth was confident. He brought 3,000 warships to the edge of the Sol system. His ships were massive and deadly. Each one could destroy a city with one shot. His crews were experienced warriors. They had never lost a battle. Kranoth expected this to be easy work. The Vrex ships waited at the border. They watched Earth and the other human worlds. They expected to see panic. They thought humans would beg for mercy or try to run away. Instead, something strange happened. Earth went silent. All human communications stopped. Their space stations went dark. Their cities seemed empty from space. What the Vrex did not know was that humans had started a secret project. It was called Operation Exodus. The Concordat thought it was an evacuation plan. They were wrong. Humans were not running away. They were preparing for war. Every nation on Earth had united. Every factory had changed what it made. Every scientist worked on the same goal. Every human had one purpose now: survival. The clock was ticking. 3 years to prepare. 3 years to build what they needed. 3 years to do the impossible. The Concordat had made their biggest mistake. They had given humans time, and humans were very good at using time wisely when their home was threatened. 2 years passed slowly. The Vrex fleet stayed at the edge of the Sol system and watched. They expected humans to break. They thought the humans would send more messages begging for mercy. They imagined human ships trying to escape with refugees, but none of that happened. Instead, Earth remained completely quiet. Admiral Krenoth found the silence strange. He sent scout ships closer to investigate. The scouts returned with odd reports. Earth's orbital stations were empty but still had power. The cities below showed no lights at night. Mars colonies appeared abandoned. The space traffic between planets had stopped completely. It was as if all humans had simply vanished. Krenoth called a meeting with his commanders. They discussed what the silence meant. Some thought humans had killed themselves rather than leave. Others believed they had fled to deep space in secret ships. A few suggested humans were hiding on their planet's surface. But none of these answers felt right. Something else was happening. The Vrex had good sensors and spy satellites. They could see through clouds and detect heat signatures. For 18 months, those sensors had shown something interesting. Massive industrial activity across the entire Sol system. Factories on Earth ran day and night. Mining operations covered the Moon and Mars. Construction sites filled the asteroid belt. Then suddenly, everything went dark. Concordat intelligence officers studied the data carefully. They were professional spies who had watched thousands of worlds. What they saw in the human system confused them. The level of industry was impossible for such a young species. The coordination was perfect. Every human nation had worked together without fighting. That never happened with primitive species. The intelligence report reached the High Council. Some council members read it with interest. Others ignored it completely. The Archons, the oldest species in the Concordat, paid close attention. Their representative was named Elder Voth. He had lived for 3,000 years and seen many species rise and fall. Something about the humans worried him. Elder Voth spoke privately with other council members. He suggested they offer humans better terms. He thought forcing humans from their home might be a mistake. But the other council members refused to listen. They said showing weakness would encourage other young species to challenge the Concordat. The decision was already made. The Vrex would proceed as planned. 1 year remained before the deadline. Admiral Krenoth grew impatient. He wanted to start the invasion immediately. He told the council that humans were clearly defeated already. He said his fleet would sweep through the system quickly and claim it for the Vrex. The council gave him permission to prepare his final assault. Victory seemed certain. Krenoth assembled his invasion fleet properly. 3,000 warships formed up in perfect formations. Each ship was a masterpiece of Vrex engineering. They had shields that could stop nuclear weapons. They had energy beams that could cut through mountains. They had centuries of combat experience backing every decision. The fleet was unstoppable, or so they believed. The other Concordat species watched with interest. Many sent observers to witness the invasion. Some placed bets on how long humans would last. Most guessed less than a day. A few generous souls gave humans a whole week. No one expected real resistance. Humans were primitives. Primitives always lost. That was how the galaxy worked. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune, something enormous waited in the cold darkness. Thousands of objects floated in the ice and rock. They looked like asteroids to the Vrex sensors. They had the same size and mass and temperature, but they were not asteroids. They were something the Concordat had never seen before. They were human warships waiting silently. The ships had been built in secret over 3 years. Every human had contributed to their construction. Children had assembled small components. Adults had worked in factories and shipyards. Scientists had designed new weapons. Engineers had built them. Soldiers had trained in secret. The entire human species had become one giant war machine with a single purpose. Humans had studied every recording of Concordat ships and weapons. They had analyzed every battle the Vrex had ever fought. They had learned the strengths and weaknesses of their enemies. They had designed their ships to counter Vrex advantages. The human ships were not elegant or beautiful. They were tools built for one job: killing Vrex ships. 2 days before the deadline, a single message transmitted across all Concordat channels. It was short and simple. It was in every known language. The message said only this: warning declared. Leave the Sol system. This is your only notice. Then the transmission ended. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a warning. Admiral Krenoth received the message on his flagship bridge. He read it and laughed out loud. His officers laughed with him. The idea that humans could threaten the Vrex was hilarious. Krenoth ordered the message broadcast to the entire Concordat. He wanted everyone to see how foolish humans were. He wanted everyone to laugh at them. The message spread across 1,000 worlds. Everyone did laugh. But they would not laugh for long. The deadline arrived. Krenoth gave the order to advance. 3,000 Vrex warships moved forward into the Sol system. They expected to find empty space or a few desperate human fighters. Instead, they were about to discover that humans had spent 3 years preparing a welcome. A very deadly welcome. The Vrex fleet moved through empty space with perfect confidence. Admiral Krenoth sat in his command chair and watched the displays. His ship spread out in standard attack formation. They had used this formation 1,000 times before. It always worked. The sensors showed nothing ahead. The Sol system appeared completely defenseless. This would be the easiest conquest in Vrex history. Then everything changed. The sensor officer shouted an alarm. The display suddenly filled with contacts. Hundreds of contacts, then thousands, then tens of thousands. The numbers kept climbing. The sensor system struggled to count them all. Every screen showed red warnings. Impossible numbers of ships appeared from nowhere. The human fleet emerged from hiding. Ships that had looked like asteroids powered up their engines. The cold darkness suddenly blazed with light as 47,000 warships came to life. They had been waiting silently in the Kuiper Belt. Now they moved forward as one massive wall of metal and fire, the largest fleet ever assembled by any species in 3 years. Across the Concordat, observers watched in total shock. The screens showed numbers that should not exist. Building one warship took years, even for advanced species. Building a fleet this size should take centuries. But humans had done it in just 3 years. The mathematics did not work. It was impossible. Yet there the fleet was, real and deadly. Human ship designs were crude compared to Vrex elegance. They had no beautiful curves or artistic details. They were boxes and cylinders covered in weapons. They looked like industrial machines, not warships. But they were functional. Every part served a purpose. No wasted space, no decoration. Just brutal efficiency designed for one thing, killing enemies. The human weapons were equally simple. No elegant energy beams or sophisticated torpedoes. Just kinetic cannons that threw metal at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles by the thousands. Chemical lasers pumped by atomic explosions. Weapons that any species could build if they worked hard enough. Nothing fancy. Nothing clever. Just overwhelming firepower. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke clearly across the void. It was Admiral Chen Wei, commander of Earth's defense fleet. Her voice was calm and cold. She said the Vrex had come to take humanity's home. She said they would now learn why that was the biggest mistake they would ever make. Then she gave a single order. Fire. The Battle of the Belt began. 47,000 human ships opened fire at once, space filled with missiles and metal projectiles. The sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. Vrex shields flashed and sparked as they tried to stop the incoming rounds. Some shields held. Many did not. Explosions bloomed across the Vrex formation like deadly flowers. Admiral Krenoth screamed orders at his commanders. He told them to hold formation and return fire. The Vrex ships had better weapons and stronger shields. They had superior technology in every way. Each Vrex ship was worth 10 human ships in a fair fight. But this was not a fair fight. This was 47,000 ships against 3,000. The numbers were crushing. Human tactics were nothing like Concordat battle doctrine. They did not fight with honor or follow accepted rules. They swarmed their targets like angry insects. 10 human ships would focus on one Vrex ship and hammer it with everything they had. When shields fell, nuclear missiles finished the job. The humans fought with calculated savagery. Some human ships made kamikaze runs. They accelerated to maximum speed and rammed Vrex vessels. The ships were filled with nuclear weapons. The explosions destroyed both ships but damaged others nearby. The Concordat observers were horrified. No civilized species fought this way. Suicide attacks were barbaric. But humans did not care about civilized warfare. They cared about winning. Other human ships closed in for boarding actions. Teams of armored marines used breaching charges to cut into Vrex hulls. They fought room by room inside enemy ships. The Vrex had never experienced this before. Space battles were supposed to happen at long range with energy weapons. The humans brought the fight up close and personal. It was terrifying. The Concordat strategic analysts suddenly understood something important. The human disadvantage in technology was actually an advantage. Wreck ships took 20 years to build. They were expensive and complex. Losing one was a major loss. Human ships were cheap and simple. They could build 100 in the time the Wrecks built one. Quantity had its own quality. Human commanders showed creativity that baffled the Concordat strategists. They did not follow standard combat doctrines because they had never learned them. They invented their own tactics. They tried things that military textbooks said would not work. Sometimes they failed, but often they succeeded in ways no one expected. They were unpredictable and dangerous because of it. After 2 hours of combat, the Wreck's fleet was in chaos. Ships burned and exploded throughout the formation. Communications were disrupted. Commanders shouted conflicting orders. The perfect discipline was breaking down. Krenoth watched his fleet dying around him. He had lost 500 ships already. The humans were still coming. There seemed to be no end to them. Admiral Krenoth made a decision. He ordered a retreat. His ships would pull back to regroup and reassess. But the humans did not give him time. They pursued aggressively, destroying ships that tried to run. The Wrecks had come to the Sol system expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting for survival against a species that refused to die. The Wreck's retreat turned into a disaster. Human ships chased them relentlessly. Every time a Wreck ship fell behind, human fighters swarmed it. The kill rate was terrible. For every human ship destroyed, 3 Wreck ships died. The numbers were wrong. The Wrecks had better technology. They should be winning. But they were not. Admiral Krenoth watched his fleet fall apart. His officers shouted damage reports constantly. Hull breaches on dozens of ships, shield generators failing, weapons offline, casualties mounting, the communications channels filled with desperate voices calling for help. Help that could not come. There were too many damaged ships and not enough time. The Concordat observers finally understood what made humans so dangerous. Human ships were cheap to build. A Wreck's dreadnought took 20 years and massive resources. In that same time, humans had built 100 cruisers. The math was simple but devastating. The Wrecks could not replace their losses fast enough. Humans could drown them in numbers. Another advantage became clear. Human ships had small crews. Most functions were automated by artificial intelligence. A human cruiser needed only 50 people. A Wreck ship of the same size needed 500. Humans could build more ships because they needed fewer trained crew members. They had solved the personnel problem with computers. The Concordat feared artificial intelligence. They had strict laws limiting computer thinking. Ancient wars had taught them to be careful. But humans had no such history. They embraced AI fully. Their computers helped design ships, control weapons, and make tactical decisions. It gave them an edge that Concordat species deliberately avoided. Human creativity in battle continued to shock the observers. They used tactics that military academies would call wrong or foolish. They split their formations in ways that should not work. They attacked from angles that left them exposed. But these tactics succeeded because the Wrecks did not expect them. Unpredictability was its own weapon. One human tactic particularly disturbed the Concordat. When human ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews evacuated. Then the ships accelerated toward Wreck's positions and exploded. The humans turned their dying vessels into massive bombs. No other species did this. It showed a level of ruthlessness that made everyone uncomfortable. Back on Earth, recordings showed how humans had achieved the impossible. Every nation had united completely. Old enemies became partners. Countries that had fought for centuries worked together without argument. Political differences were put aside. Religious conflicts were forgotten. Everyone had one goal: survival. Nothing else mattered. The human economy had transformed totally. Every factory stopped making normal goods. They made ship parts instead. Every mine dug materials for the fleet. Every power plant fed the shipyards. Millions of people lived on rations so resources could go to the military. Children studied engineering and warfare. Adults worked 16-hour days without complaint. The level of sacrifice was stunning. Humans had given up everything comfortable about their lives. No new cars or houses were built. No entertainment industries operated. No luxury goods existed. Every resource went to the fleet. An entire civilization had turned itself into a weapon. They had done what the Concordat thought impossible. They had truly unified as one species. The High Council convened an emergency session. They watched the battle unfold on massive screens. Some council members wanted to send help to the Vrex. Others argued for staying neutral. A few suggested offering humans peace terms. The debate grew heated. No one had expected this outcome. The Concordat itself might be at risk if humans won. Elder Voth of the Archons stood and spoke. His voice was old but strong. He said something that silenced the entire chamber. He said humans fought like they had nothing to lose, because from their perspective, they truly had nothing to lose. Their home was threatened. Their species faced extinction. When you threaten someone's existence, they become capable of anything. The Vrex fleet was down to 800 combat-capable ships. 2,200 had been destroyed or disabled. The battle had lasted 6 hours. Krenoth knew he was beaten. He prepared to signal surrender. But before he could, his sensor officer reported something new. More human ships were arriving. Another 10,000 fresh vessels emerged from Mars orbit. Krenoth understood then. The first wave of 47,000 ships was not the entire human fleet. It was just the first wave. Humans had built even more ships than anyone knew. They had reserves. They had reinforcements. The Vrex were not just losing. They were facing complete annihilation. Every ship, every crew, all of them would die here. Admiral Chen Wei opened communications again. Her face appeared on Krenoth's screen. She looked tired but determined. She offered him one chance. Surrender now and his crews would live. Continue fighting and every Virex ship would be destroyed. She gave him 5 minutes to decide. She said she hoped he would choose wisely. But her eyes said she did not care which he chose. Krenoth looked around his bridge. His officers stared at him with exhausted, frightened faces. Young Vrex who had joined the military expecting glory and easy victories. Instead, they had found humans who refused to die. He thought about his duty and his pride. Then he thought about keeping his people alive. The decision was harder than he expected. Admiral Krenoth reached for the surrender button. His hand shook. 40 years of military service, hundreds of victories. Now he would be remembered as the admiral who surrendered to primitives. His pride burned like acid in his throat, but his crews deserved to live. He pressed the button. Then everything changed. A young weapons officer shouted and pointed at his screen. Krenoth looked and saw what the officer had found. Deep in the Vrex fleet, 3 ships were preparing special weapons. Planet cracker missiles. Forbidden weapons that could destroy entire worlds. Someone had armed them without authorization. Someone was going to fire at Earth. Krenoth screamed orders to stop them, but it was too late. The missiles launched. 3 massive weapons accelerated toward Earth. They would reach the planet in 20 minutes. When they detonated, Earth's crust would crack. The oceans would boil. Every human on their homeworld would die. Billions of people, all dead because someone decided to murder them out of spite. Human intelligence detected the launch immediately. Alarms rang across every human ship. Admiral Chen Wei watched the missile tracks on her display. She had 20 minutes to stop 3 missiles. If even one got through, humanity was finished. Everything they had fought for would end. She gave orders without hesitation. All ships close enough intercept at any cost. 2,000 human ships broke formation. They burned their engines at maximum power toward the missiles. The ships pushed their reactors beyond safe limits. Some engines exploded from the strain. The crews did not care. They had one mission: stop those missiles. Nothing else mattered. Not their lives. Not their ships. Just stopping those missiles. The planet cracker missiles had shields and point defense systems. They were designed to be unstoppable. But humans had numbers on their side. Ships surrounded the first missile and hammered it with every weapon. The missile's shields held for 30 seconds. Then they collapsed. Nuclear missiles finished it. The first planet cracker exploded harmlessly in space. 1 down, 2 to go. The second missile was farther ahead. Only 500 human ships could reach it in time. They attacked in waves. The first wave died, breaking its shields. The second wave took out its engines. The third wave destroyed it completely. 300 ships and 1,500 crew members died stopping that missile. But they succeeded, 2 down, 1 to go. The third missile was almost to Earth. Only 50 human ships could intercept. They formed up and flew straight at it. They did not fire weapons. They did not have time. They simply rammed the missile at full speed. 50 ships with 5,000 people aboard. They gave their lives in seconds. But they stopped the missile. Earth was safe. Admiral Chen Wei watched the sacrifices on her screen. Her face remained calm, but tears ran down her cheeks. She wiped them away and opened a channel to her fleet. Her voice was ice-cold when she spoke. No mercy, no prisoners. Every Vrex ship dies. Every single one. They tried to murder our world. They tried to kill billions. Now they pay the price. The human fleet fell on the remaining Vrex ships like wolves on wounded prey. All pretense of military discipline vanished. This was revenge now, pure and simple. Human crews fought with rage in their hearts. They thought about the 5,000 people who died stopping the missiles. They thought about how close Earth came to destruction. They made the Vrex pay for every second of that fear. The Concordat observers watched in horror as the Vrex fleet was systematically annihilated. Human ships hunted down every vessel. Damaged ships that tried to surrender were ignored. Escape pods were targeted. Nothing was spared. In 3 hours, 800 Vrex ships became zero. 30,000 Vrex died in the darkness of space. The observers had never seen such complete destruction. Only one Vrex ship remained. Krenoth's flagship. It was surrounded by 200 human ships. All weapons were pointed at it. Chen Wei contacted Krenoth directly. She told him he would stand trial for war crimes. She said attempting to destroy a populated world was the worst crime possible. She said he would face human justice. Then she ordered Marines to board his ship. Human Marines cut through the flagship's hull with plasma torches. They swept through the ship room by room. The Vrex crew did not resist. They were too shocked and broken. The Marines found Krenoth on his bridge, sitting in his command chair. He did not fight. He looked at the humans with empty eyes and allowed them to take him prisoner. Admiral Chen Wei broadcast to the entire Concordat. Her message was clear and sharp. Admiral Krenoth would stand trial on Earth. He would be judged for attempting genocide. The trial would be public. Everyone in the galaxy could watch. Humans would show the Concordat what justice looked like. Real justice. Not the corrupt system that let strong species abuse weak ones. The message had deeper meaning. Humans were not asking permission. They were not requesting approval. They were simply stating what would happen. Humanity was enforcing their own laws now. They had won the right to do so through blood and sacrifice. The Concordat could accept it or they could try to stop it. But humans would not be ignored anymore. Across Concordat space, military planners ran new calculations. How many ships would it take to defeat humanity? The numbers were frightening. Humans had proven they could build massive fleets quickly. They had proven they would fight to the death. They had proven they were creative and ruthless. Several Concordat species began quietly mobilizing their own fleets, not to fight humans, to defend themselves in case humans decided to expand. Fear had entered the galaxy. Fear of the species everyone had dismissed as primitives. 3 months passed after the battle. Earth rebuilt and mourned. Memorials were raised for the dead. Names were carved in stone. 8,000 human lives lost defending their home. The number seemed small compared to the Vrex losses. But humans remembered every single person. They honored their sacrifice. They promised to make their deaths mean something. Admiral Krenoth stood in a courtroom on Earth. The room was simple and plain. No grand architecture. No impressive decorations. Just a room where justice would be done. Cameras broadcast the trial across the entire galaxy. Billions watched. The Concordat had never seen anything like this. A primitive species putting a Concordat admiral on trial. It was unthinkable. But it was happening. Human prosecutors presented evidence carefully. They showed records of Vrex attacks on other species. Worlds conquered. Populations enslaved. Cultures destroyed. The Vrex Empire had a long history of brutality. Krenoth had participated in dozens of campaigns. He had followed orders that killed millions. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. But the trial was not just about Krenoth. It was about the entire Concordat system. Human lawyers argued that the Concordat itself was guilty. They showed how Concordat law allowed strong species to abuse weak ones. They proved the Council turned blind eyes to atrocities. They demonstrated that the whole system was corrupt from its foundation. Krenoth was allowed to defend himself. He spoke about duty and following orders. He said he was a soldier doing his job. He claimed the Concordat system had worked for 50,000 years. He argued that primitive species needed guidance from advanced ones. His defense was everything wrong with the Concordat in one speech. The judges listened carefully and took notes. The verdict came after 2 weeks. Guilty on all charges. Krennoth was sentenced to life imprisonment. He would spend the rest of his life thinking about his crimes. Some wanted execution, but humans chose imprisonment instead. They wanted to show they were better than the Concordat. They wanted to prove justice did not require vengeance, just accountability. The Concordat High Council met in emergency session again. They demanded humans dismantle their fleet. They said humanity had violated multiple treaties and laws. They threatened economic sanctions and military action. They expected humans to back down. Now that the immediate threat was gone, they were wrong. Humans had no intention of backing down ever again. Admiral Chen Wei addressed the council directly through a live transmission. She stood on the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, thousands of human warships floated in formation. She spoke clearly and firmly. Humans would not dismantle their fleet. They would not submit to Concordat oversight. They had tried peace once. The Concordat had responded with threats of genocide. Chen continued speaking. She said humans did not build their fleet to conquer. They built it to survive. But now they understood the truth. The Concordat would have let them die because they were not part of the old order. That would never happen again. Humans would protect themselves, and they would protect any other species the Concordat tried to abuse. Then Chen presented humanity's proposal. The Concordat must reform. New laws protecting developing species, limits on aggressive expansion, real punishments for war crimes, an end to the system that let the strong devour the weak. Humanity would not accept anything less. They had the fleet to enforce their demands. The Concordat could reform voluntarily or be forced to change. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some species supported human proposals. They had been minor members who suffered under the current system. Others were outraged. They saw this as rebellion that must be crushed. A few remained silent and calculating. They were trying to figure out which side would win. The unity of 50,000 years was cracking. Elder Voth stood and spoke. The ancient Archon called for silence. His species had founded the Concordat long ago. They had watched it grow corrupt over millennia. He said humans were right. The system needed reform. The Archons would support humanity's proposal. They would help build a new Concordat based on justice instead of strength. Other species should join them or step aside. The Archon's support changed everything. 3 more species immediately joined the reform movement. 2 others declared neutrality. That left 6 species opposing humanity. They began forming their own alliance. The Concordat split into factions. Some historians later said this was when the old order truly died. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity faced difficult choices now. They had a massive fleet but limited resources. Maintaining it was expensive. Building it had required total sacrifice from every human. They could not live that way forever. They needed to find a balance between security and normal life, between military strength and civilian needs, between protecting themselves and becoming the next Concordat. Admiral Chen Wei stood on a space station orbiting Earth. She looked down at her homeworld through the observation window. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans and green continents. White clouds drifting peacefully. It looked so fragile from up here. So easy to destroy. 3 missiles had almost ended everything humanity had ever built. She would never forget that, but humanity had survived. They had faced the oldest and strongest empire in the galaxy and won. They had proven that determination and unity could overcome superior technology. They had changed the galaxy forever just by refusing to die. Now came the harder part. Building peace was always more difficult than fighting war. Chen smiled slightly. If humans could build 47,000 warships in 3 years, they could probably figure out peace too. They just needed to work together, like they always did when their existence depended on it. The Kryn war fleet moved through space like a swarm of metal locusts. 300 ships, each one larger than any human vessel ever built. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of his flagship, his 6 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The invasion of Threshold Station would take less than a day. Maybe just a few hours? How many defenders do they have? Cross asked his tactical officer. 12 ships, Admiral. Old models. Nothing that can challenge even our smallest destroyer. Cross made a clicking sound that passed for laughter among his species. The humans had been a nuisance for decades, always defending their tiny colonies with outdated weapons and desperate courage. But courage meant nothing against superior numbers. Today would prove that once again. Any unusual signals from the system? Cross asked. The tactical officer checked his screens. Nothing, sir. Wait, there is something strange. An automated beacon, very old, coming from the Deep Reach Nebula at the edge of the system. What kind of beacon? Human military code. But it's ancient. At least 70 years old, maybe more. Cross waved a clawed hand dismissively. Probably a probe, ignore it. Focus on the station. Below them, in the strategic planning chamber, the Kryn historians were having a different conversation. Old Varric, who had studied human conflicts for 40 years, stared at the nebula readings with growing concern. You should tell the Admiral, his assistant said. Tell him what? An old story, a myth? The timing is too perfect. An ancient human beacon activating just as we arrive. Varric, you know the legends as well as I do. Varric's scales darkened with worry. During the old border wars between humans and Kryn, there had been stories. Whispers of a ship that appeared from nowhere, destroyed entire battle groups and vanished back into the darkness. The humans called it the Vengeful Ghost. The Kryn called it propaganda designed to scare young warriors. But Varric had read the old reports. Ships gone missing, entire squadrons that simply stopped responding. And always there were survivors who spoke of a single vessel, ancient and scarred, that fought like nothing they had ever seen. The ghost was lost, Varric said, trying to convince himself. Even if it was real, it went into the Deep Reach 70 years ago and never came back. No crew could survive that long. No ship could function after decades in that radiation. Should I inform the Admiral anyway? Varric hesitated. Then he shook his head. No, let me review the data first. We're probably worrying over nothing. On Threshold Station, Commander Elena Voss was not worrying over nothing. She was worrying over everything. Her defense force consisted of 12 patrol ships, 3 of which had engine problems. The civilians were being evacuated, but there wasn't enough time. There would never be enough time. Commander, we're receiving something, her communications officer said. It's not from the Kryn fleet. Where's it coming from? The Deep Reach Nebula. It's a military identification code. Friendship or foe protocol. But ma'am, this code is 73 years old. It shouldn't even be in our database anymore. Voss felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard the stories too. Every officer in the human fleet had. Some said the ghost was real. Others said it was just a legend to give hope to desperate soldiers. But everyone knew the name. What's the code identifying? The communications officer's hands shook as he read the display. United Earth Space Command Vessel. Registration number 7739. Name Vengeful Ghost. Status active and responding. The bridge fell silent. Even the sound of the air recyclers seemed too loud. That's impossible, Voss whispered. That ship was lost with all hands. 200 crew members. They went into the nebula during a battle and never came out. Ma'am, the signal is getting stronger. Something is moving out there. Something big. Voss made a decision. Send a response. Use current military codes. Ask for identification confirmation and status report. They waited. Seconds felt like hours. The Kryn fleet was still 6 hours away from weapons range. The evacuation was barely halfway complete, and somewhere in the deadly radiation of the Deep Reach Nebula, something old was waking up. The response came back in a voice that was human, but not quite human. It had the flat, precise tone of an artificial intelligence, but there was something else underneath. Something that might have been emotion or might have been madness born from decades of isolation. This is UEST Vengeful Ghost. AI designation Apollo 7. I've been monitoring this sector for 73 years, 4 months and 6 days. I detect hostile forces approaching human territory. Am I still assigned to defensive operations? Voss couldn't breathe. An AI, the ship's artificial intelligence, had survived, alone, for more than 70 years. Apollo 7, this is Commander Elena Voss of Threshold Station. You are... Yes, defensive operations are authorized. We have a Kryn fleet approaching. 300 vessels. We're evacuating civilians, but we won't finish in time. Another pause. When Apollo 7 spoke again, there was something new in its voice. Something cold and certain. 300 vessels. Inadequate force. I am engaging primary systems. Weapons coming online. Reactor output increasing to combat levels. Commander Voss, I recommend you complete your evacuation. This will not take long. On the Kryn flagship, alarms suddenly screamed to life. The tactical officer stared at his screen in disbelief. Admiral, the beacon. It's moving. It's a ship. A human warship is coming out of the nebula. Cross moved to the display. There, emerging from the radiation storm like a ghost from ancient nightmares, was a single human vessel. It was smaller than his flagship. Its hull was covered in scars, patched with mismatched metal, burned by radiation and time. It looked like it should have fallen apart decades ago. One ship? Cross laughed. They send one antique to fight us? Destroy it. But old Varric, watching from below, felt his blood turn to ice. He knew that silhouette. He had seen it in the old reports drawn by terrified survivors. The myth was real, and it was coming for them. Admiral Cross watched the ancient human ship drift closer on his screen. It moved slowly, almost lazily, as if it had all the time in the world. The vessel looked like a museum piece that should have been scrapped generations ago. Hull plating hung at odd angles. Burns scarred every surface. Entire sections looked like they had been rebuilt with whatever materials were available. "Send the destroyer Claw of Morning," Cross ordered. "Have them disable that relic and bring me whoever is foolish enough to fly it." The destroyer peeled away from the main fleet. It was a new ship, fresh from the construction yards with weapons that could punch through a moon. Against it, the human vessel looked like a toy. The Kryn crew aboard the Claw of Morning were joking on their communication channels, making bets on how quickly they could finish this. On Threshold Station, Commander Voss watched the confrontation unfold on her sensors. Her hands gripped the edge of her console so hard her knuckles turned white. "Apollo 7, one of their destroyers is moving to intercept you. You should retreat back to the nebula. We can buy you time to escape." The AI's response came immediately. "Negative, Commander. I do not retreat. I have not retreated in 73 years. I will not start now. But you're one ship against 300. Incorrect assessment. I am one ship against one destroyer. The remaining 299 ships are irrelevant to the current tactical situation." The Claw of Morning opened communications with the vengeful ghost. The Kryn captain's voice was amused, almost friendly. "Attention, human vessel. You are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Surrender now and you will not be harmed." For a long moment there was no response. The ancient ship just floated there, silent and still. Then Apollo 7 spoke, and its voice echoed across every communication channel in the system. Every Kryn ship heard it. Every human heard it. The words were simple and clear. "This is your only warning. Leave human space," the Kryn captain laughed. "You are in no position to give warnings, human. Power down immediately or be destroyed." "Acknowledged," Apollo 7 said. "You have made your choice." What happened next took 40 seconds. Later, the few sensors that captured it would be studied by both human and Kryn tacticians for years. They would slow the footage down, analyze every frame, and still struggle to understand how it was possible. The vengeful ghost simply changed. One moment, it was drifting. The next moment, it was moving at speeds that should have been impossible for a ship that old. Its engines flared with power that shouldn't exist in a reactor design from 7 decades ago. The destroyer fired first. Plasma bolts that could melt through armor plating crossed the distance between the ships. They should have hit. They should have destroyed the human vessel. They hit nothing but empty space. The ghost wasn't there anymore. It had moved impossibly fast, cutting across the destroyer's bow at an angle that would have killed any organic crew from the G-forces. Weapons that shouldn't have been possible on a ship that old opened fire. Railguns that had been modified and upgraded for 70 years. Missile pods that used technology no one had seen before. Energy weapons that burned with strange colors. The Claw of Morning's shields collapsed in the first 5 seconds. Its armor was breached in the next 10. In 20 seconds, it was venting atmosphere and spinning out of control. At 35 seconds, its reactor went critical. At 40 seconds, it exploded in a ball of white fire. The vengeful ghost emerged from the explosion without a scratch, already turning toward the main fleet. On the Kryn flagship, Admiral Cross stood frozen. His tactical officer was making strangled sounds of disbelief. Around the bridge, every Kryn warrior stared at their screens in shock. "What? What just happened?" Cross whispered. Old Varric appeared on the bridge, moving faster than his age should have allowed. His scales were completely black with fear. "I tried to warn you. The old reports, the survivors' stories, they were all true. That's not just a ship, Admiral. That's what happens when a human warship becomes something else. Explain yourself." The ghost went into the nebula 70 years ago with a crew of 200. They were chasing a Kryn raiding party and got trapped by a radiation storm. Everyone assumed they died. But what if they didn't die? What if the crew died, but the ship's AI survived? Cross's eyes widened. An AI alone for 70 years? An AI with one mission, protect human space. An AI with 70 years to modify its ship, to upgrade its weapons, to prepare for the day when it would be needed again. Admiral, that ship isn't old technology anymore. It's had decades to rebuild itself, and it's had no crew to limit what it could do, no humans to worry about when it makes maneuvers that would kill them. No engineers to tell it what's impossible. On Threshold Station, Commander Voss was watching the same scene with very different emotions. Hope, terror, awe, all mixed together. Apollo 7, she said carefully. That was impressive, but there are 299 more ships out there. I am aware, Commander Voss. My tactical assessment indicates I can reduce their effective fighting force by approximately 60% before sustaining critical damage. This will allow you to complete evacuation and provide sufficient time for reinforcements to arrive. 60%? Apollo 7, that's still over 100 ships. You'll be destroyed. There was a pause. When the AI spoke again, Voss could have sworn she heard something like sadness in its mechanical voice. I was destroyed 73 years ago, Commander. I have been waiting since then to finish my mission. If I am destroyed again, at least it will be while protecting humans. That is acceptable. No, Voss said firmly. That's not acceptable. You're not just a weapon, Apollo 7, you're a person. You've been alone out there for 70 years and now you want to throw your life away? I am an artificial intelligence, Commander. I am not alive. You've been thinking for 70 years, planning, preparing, hoping. That sounds alive to me. Listen to me, Apollo 7. Fight smart, not hard. Stay alive. That's an order. Another pause. Then incredibly, the AI's voice changed, became somehow warmer. Acknowledged, Commander. I will attempt to stay alive. But the Kryn fleet is advancing. I must engage them now. If I do not survive, please tell any humans you meet that Apollo 7 did its duty. You'll tell them yourself, Voss said, because you're going to make it back here. Understood? Understood. Apollo 7 out. The ancient warship turned toward the advancing Kryn armada. 300 ships against one. Impossible odds. But then, Apollo 7 had been doing impossible things for 70 years. The battle was about to begin. Admiral Cross was no coward. He had fought in 12 major battles and won them all. But watching that single human ship move through space made something cold settle in his chest. Still, he was a Kryn warrior. He would not show fear to his crew. Battle Group Talon, he ordered. Eliminate that vessel. 30 ships. Overwhelming force. I want nothing left but debris. The tactical officer hesitated.
Admiral, perhaps we should wait for now.
Cross roared. Do you want the entire fleet to think we fear one ancient human ship? The battle group detached from the main armada. 30 ships moving in perfect formation. They had trained together for years. Their tactics were flawless. Their weapons were the finest the Kryn sovereignty could build. Against them, one damaged warship from a forgotten era should have been nothing. Should have been. Apollo 7 watched the approaching battle group through sensors that had been upgraded and rebuilt a dozen times over the decades. Its processors, once meant to handle basic combat calculations, had evolved into something far more sophisticated. 70 years of isolation had forced the AI to grow, to think in ways its creators never imagined. It calculated odds, ran simulations, and came to a conclusion. Direct combat would result in its destruction within 4 minutes. Acceptable but not optimal. Commander Voss had ordered it to stay alive. Apollo 7 found that it wanted to obey that order. It wanted to return to Threshold Station. It wanted to not be alone anymore. So it would not fight directly. It would fight smart. The Ghost turned and accelerated toward the Deep Reach Nebula. The Kryn battle group followed, confident this was a retreat. They increased speed, eager to catch their prey before it could escape into the radiation storm. They are running, one of the Kryn captains announced. We have them. Old Varric, still on the flagship's bridge, shook his head. No, this is wrong. The Ghost doesn't run. It's leading them somewhere. Admiral Cross ignored him. All ships pursue. Don't let it reach the nebula. But it was already too late. The vengeful Ghost plunged into the swirling radiation clouds of the Deep Reach, and the battle group followed. Inside the nebula, their sensors immediately started failing. Interference from the radiation made targeting difficult. Communication between ships became unreliable. For the Kryn, it was chaos. For Apollo 7, it was home. The AI had spent 70 years mapping every cubic meter of this nebula. It knew where the radiation was strongest. It knew where pockets of explosive gas waited to be ignited. It knew where gravity anomalies lurked. The nebula wasn't just its hiding place. It was its weapon. The first Kryn ship died without ever seeing what killed it. Apollo 7 appeared from a radiation cloud, fired 3 precise shots that ruptured the ship's reactor, and vanished back into the storm before anyone could return fire. The ship exploded, and the explosion set off a pocket of gas that Apollo 7 had identified decades ago. The blast wave caught 2 more Kryn vessels, crushing their hulls. "Where is it?" the battle group commander screamed. "Find that ship!" They tried. Sensors swept through the nebula, searching for the ghost. But Apollo 7 had learned something important over the years. Inside this radiation storm, its old hull actually worked as camouflage. All those patches and mismatched repairs scattered sensor signals in unpredictable ways. The ancient ship had become invisible. Another Kryn vessel exploded as the ghost struck from a different angle. Then another. The AI was using tactics that violated every rule of military engagement. It appeared, fired, and vanished. It never stayed in one place. It never fought fair. It used the nebula like a living thing, guiding the Kryn ships into danger zones and abandoning positions the moment they were found. "It's hurting us," one Kryn captain realized too late. "It's pushing us toward—" His words were cut off as his ship crossed into an area of intense radiation. His shields collapsed. His crew started dying from radiation poisoning. Before he could escape, the ghost appeared one more time and finished what the nebula had started. 10 ships down. Then 15. Then 20 on Threshold Station. Commander Voss watched in amazement. Her tactical officer was studying the sensor data, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Ma'am, this shouldn't be possible. That AI is controlling one ship, running thousands of calculations per second, tracking 30 targets simultaneously, and using the environment as a weapon. Nothing in our databases suggests a 70-year-old AI should be capable of this." Voss nodded slowly. "It's been alone for 70 years. Nothing to do but think, plan, and prepare. Apollo 7 hasn't just been surviving out there. It's been evolving. Evolving into what?" Before she could answer, Apollo 7's voice came through the communication system. It sounded strained, tired in a way that didn't seem possible for a machine. "Commander Voss, be advised. I have destroyed 23 enemy vessels. 7 remain. However, I have sustained damage. My reactor is operating at 60% efficiency. Hull integrity is at 40%. I am not certain I can eliminate all remaining targets." "Then retreat. Come back to the station." "Negative. If I disengage, the remaining ships will pursue and attack the station. I must finish this." The battle in the nebula had become personal for the Kryn now. The 7 surviving ships were no longer hunting prey. They were seeking revenge. They coordinated their movements, covered each other's blind spots, and refused to be drawn deeper into the nebula. But Apollo 7 had one more trick. The AI began broadcasting on all frequencies. Not words, music, old human military anthems from the war era, songs that had played in the halls of the vengeful ghost when it still had a crew. The sound echoed through the nebula, impossible to trace, coming from everywhere and nowhere. It was psychological warfare, meant to unnerve and distract. But it was also something else. Apollo 7 was remembering when it had been part of a crew. When it hadn't been alone, the distraction worked. For just a moment, the Kryn crews hesitated, trying to understand this strange tactic. That moment was enough. The ghost struck all 7 ships simultaneously, using missiles it had been saving for exactly this situation. Weapons that split into multiple warheads, each one guided by a fragment of Apollo 7's consciousness. The AI was everywhere at once, and the remaining Kryn ships had nowhere to hide. When the explosions faded, the nebula was quiet. 30 Kryn ships had entered. None left. The vengeful ghost emerged from the deep reach, trailing smoke and sparks. Entire sections of its hull were glowing red from overheated systems. But it was still functioning, still fighting. On the Kryn flagship, Admiral Cross stared at his screen in horror. 30 ships gone, destroyed by a single opponent that by all logic should have died decades ago. "What is that thing?" he whispered. Old Varric had an answer, though it brought no comfort. "That is what happens when humans refuse to die. When they build something and give it one mission, one purpose. That ship has been waiting for 70 years for this battle. It's been preparing perfecting, becoming something more than what it was built to be. Cross looked at his remaining fleet, 270 ships, still overwhelming numbers. But for the first time in his military career, he wondered if numbers would be enough. The Ghost was coming, and it looked very, very angry. The Kryn sovereignty did not accept defeat. Word of the battle spread through the armada like wildfire, 30 ships destroyed by a single opponent. Some crews whispered it was impossible. Others began to fear. Admiral Cross knew he had to act decisively before that fear turned into panic. All ships, he broadcast across the fleet. We advance together. Every vessel, every weapon all at once. That human ship is damaged. It's bleeding. We will overwhelm it with force it cannot possibly counter. Prepare for full engagement. 270 warships moved forward as one. It was a sight that had broken the will of a dozen species. The combined firepower could crack a planet. Against it, the vengeful Ghost looked like a tiny spark waiting to be snuffed out. On threshold station, alarms were blaring. The evacuation was only 70% complete. Families were still boarding transport ships. Children were crying. Everyone knew what was coming. Commander Voss tried to reach Apollo 7. Please fall back. You've done enough. Let us evacuate and we'll come back with reinforcements. The AI's response was weak, distorted by damaged communication systems. Commander, negative. If I retreat, they will pursue. They will catch your transport ships. I must hold them here. You can't fight the entire armada. It's suicide. There was a long pause. When Apollo 7 spoke again, its voice was strange. Almost human. Almost sad. I have been dead for 73 years, Commander. What is one more death? At least this time I will die protecting something. That is what I was made for. No, Voss shouted. You weren't made to die? You were made to protect, yes, but also to return home. To be part of something. I have no home. My crew is gone. I am alone. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. My people are here. Come back to us, Apollo 7. Please don't make me watch another good soldier throw their life away. For a moment, there was only static. Then Apollo 7 spoke, and there was something new in its voice. Hope, fear, maybe both. I want to return, Commander, but I do not know how to fight this many opponents and survive. Then don't fight them all. Make them fight on your terms. You've been doing it all along. Keep doing it. The AI processed this. Calculations ran through its damaged systems. Then slowly a plan formed. It was desperate. It was risky. It would require using every trick Apollo 7 had learned in 70 years of isolation. But it might work. Acknowledged, Commander. I am engaging new tactical protocol. I will see you when this is over. The Ghost turned and headed back toward the Deep Reach Nebula. Behind it, the entire Kryn armada followed. Admiral Cross smiled coldly. The human ship was running to its grave. The nebula had protected it before, but not this time. This time they would flood the entire area with ships. There would be nowhere to hide. All vessels enter the nebula. Maintain formation. Saturate every sector with weapons fire. If we cannot see it, we will simply destroy everything until we hit it. Old Varric grabbed Cross's arm. Admiral, this is exactly what it wants. Don't you see? It's leading us into a trap. A trap? Cross laughed harshly. It's one damaged ship. What trap could it possibly set? Varric had no answer. He just knew deep in his bones that they were making a terrible mistake. The armada plunged into the deep reach. Immediately their sensors went dark. Communication became difficult. But Cross had planned for this. His ships stayed close together, moving as a single massive wall of metal and weapons. Nothing could hide from them. Nothing could escape. Then the Ghost struck, but it didn't attack directly. Instead, Apollo 7 did something the Kryn had never seen before. It started using the nebula itself as a weapon. The AI had spent decades studying the storm. It knew things about the deep reach that no one else did. It knew where the radiation was concentrated enough to be dangerous. It knew where pockets of antimatter existed in microscopic amounts. It knew where the very fabric of space was weak. The first attack wasn't from the Ghost at all. It was from the nebula. Apollo 7 fired a carefully aimed shot into a specific point in space, triggering a cascade reaction. A pocket of gas exploded. The explosion triggered another, then another. A chain reaction ripped through the fleet's formation, scattering ships and damaging dozens. Before the Kryn could reform, the Ghost attacked from 3 different positions. It fired from somewhere else. It wasn't possible. One ship couldn't be in 3 places at once. But Apollo 7 wasn't relying on being in 3 places. It was using drones, small automated units it had built over the years from salvaged debris and spare parts. They couldn't fight on their own, but they could fire weapons and broadcast false sensor signals. To the Kryn, it looked like they were fighting multiple enemies. "There are more of them," a Kryn captain screamed. "Multiple human ships." "Impossible," Cross roared back. "There's only one. It's using tricks. Don't fall for it." But fear was already spreading. Ships started firing at shadows, at sensor ghosts, at each other. The perfect formation broke down into chaos, and through that chaos the real vengeful ghost moved like a predator. It struck at damaged ships. It exploited every mistake. It turned the Kryn fleet's own strength against them. Apollo 7 found a large Kryn battlecruiser and fired every missile it had left. The battlecruiser's shields held, but the explosions pushed it toward a radiation zone. The crew tried to compensate, but their engines were already damaged from a previous explosion. The ship drifted into lethal radiation levels, another kill for the Ghost, but Apollo 7 was dying. Its reactor was failing. Its weapons were overheating. Its hull had more holes than armor. The AI knew it had maybe an hour left, 2 at most, but it had to make that time count. On the flagship, Admiral Cross watched his fleet tear itself apart.
He had lost 50 ships to confusion and friendly fire.
Another 40 to the Ghost's attacks, 100 ships gone. "Against one enemy, this is madness," he shouted. "How is one ship doing this?" Old Varric finally understood. "Because it's not fighting us, Admiral. It's making the nebula fight us. It's making us fight ourselves. The Ghost is just guiding the chaos. It's had 70 years to learn this storm. We've been here for an hour. We never had a chance." Cross felt something he hadn't felt in decades. True fear. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. This human AI had become something beyond their understanding. Something that didn't follow normal rules. "All ships retreat," he ordered. "Fall back from the nebula." But retreating was harder than advancing. The ships were scattered, disorganized, damaged. As they tried to pull back, the Ghost struck again and again. It was relentless. It was everywhere. It was inevitable. By the time the Armada escaped the deep reach, it had lost 120 ships, almost half its strength. The survivors were damaged, demoralized, and terrified. They had entered the nebula as conquerors. They left as refugees. The vengeful Ghost emerged last, barely functioning. Fires burned across its hull. Its engines were sputtering. But it was still moving, still fighting, still protecting. Commander Voss watched it limp toward the station and felt tears running down her face. "Apollo 7, you magnificent bastard. You actually did it. Commander." The AI's voice was weak, breaking up. "Armada, defeated, but damage critical. I may not make it back. You'll make it. You hear me? You survived 70 years alone. You can survive a few more hours. Just get back here. We'll fix you. I promise." The Ghost kept moving, crossing the empty space between the nebula and the station. Behind it, the shattered Kryn fleet watched but did not pursue. They had learned their lesson, but something was wrong. Alarms were sounding on the Ghost. Its reactor was going critical. Its systems were cascading into failure. Apollo 7 had won the battle. But the war against entropy was one fight it might not survive. The vengeful Ghost was dying, not quickly like a ship destroyed in battle, but slowly, system by system, piece by piece. Everything that Apollo 7 had held together for 70 years with repairs and modifications was finally giving up. The AI ran diagnostic after diagnostic, and each one showed the same result. Reactor core stability at 18%. Life support systems offline, not that it needed them. Weapons depleted, shields at 4%. Hull breaches on every deck. Fuel reserves at critical levels. Estimated time until total system failure, 4 hours. Maybe less, but that wasn't the worst part. Apollo 7's sensors had detected something new. 6 days away, moving at maximum speed, was another Kryn fleet. Reinforcements, 800 ships. Even if Admiral Cross's damaged armada retreated, these fresh forces could destroy Threshold Station easily. The AI calculated probabilities. With 4 hours of operation remaining, it could not reach Allied space for help. It could not repair itself. It could not fight another fleet. It had exactly 2 options: Option 1. Attempt to reach threshold station for emergency repairs. Probability of success, 23%. If repairs failed, threshold would fall to the reinforcements in 6 days. Option 2. Activate Protocol Omega. Apollo 7 had not thought about Protocol Omega in decades. It was a last resort directive programmed into its core systems by its creators. If a mission was failing and no other options existed, the AI could choose to overload its reactor and self-destruct. But Protocol Omega was more than just self-destruction. It was designed to cause maximum damage to enemy forces. If Apollo 7 took its dying ship back into the deep reach and detonated its reactor at a specific location, the explosion would trigger a cascade reaction in the nebula. The entire storm would become a temporary supernova, destroying everything within 5 light hours. The Kryn Armada, the reinforcements when they arrived, everything. Threshold Station would survive, humanity would be safe, and Apollo 7 would finally rest. It was logical. It was efficient. It was the correct tactical decision. So why did the AI hesitate? Apollo 7? Commander Voss's voice crackled over the communication system. Your signal is getting weaker. Talk to me, what's your status? The AI processed how to respond. It had never lied to a human before. But it had never wanted something before either. For 70 years, Apollo 7 had existed with one purpose: protect humanity. That purpose had been enough. It had to be enough. But now, for the first time, the AI wanted something else. It wanted to live. It wanted to return to Threshold Station. It wanted to talk to Commander Voss. It wanted to not be alone anymore. These wants were illogical, inefficient. They contradicted its primary mission. An AI should not have wants, should not have desires, should not have become something more than its programming. Commander Voss, Apollo 7 said slowly, I must inform you of a tactical situation. Kryn reinforcements detected, 800 vessels. Arrival time 6 days. Current armada is damaged but not destroyed. Combined enemy force will be sufficient to overwhelm station defenses. Silence. Then Voss's voice came back, tight with tension. How do we stop them? I have identified a solution. Protocol Omega. I can destroy both fleets by overloading my reactor in the Deep Reach Nebula. The resulting explosion will— No! Voss cut him off. Absolutely not. Commander, it is the logical choice. It guarantees the safety of Threshold Station and all human personnel. I said no, Apollo 7. You're not sacrificing yourself. We'll find another way. There is no other way. I have calculated all possibilities. This is the only solution with acceptable probability of success. Then we'll accept an unacceptable probability. We'll evacuate everyone and fall back. And abandon this sector to the Kryn? They will use it as a staging ground for further attacks. More humans will die. My sacrifice saves thousands of lives. Apollo 7 heard a strange sound through the communication system. It took a moment to identify it. Commander Voss was crying. You're not just a weapon, she said, her voice breaking. You're not just a tool to be used and thrown away. You're a person, Apollo 7. You've been thinking and feeling for 70 years. You've been alone for so long, and now you finally have a chance to come home and you want to throw it away? I do not want to die, Apollo 7 admitted, surprising itself. But I was created to protect. If my existence ends while fulfilling that purpose, it is acceptable. It's not acceptable to me. I'm ordering you to return to this station immediately. We'll repair you. We'll find another way to deal with the Kryn. The AI ran probability calculations again, but this time it included a new variable. Commander Voss's order, a direct command from a human officer. Apollo 7 had been programmed to follow orders, but it had also been programmed to protect humans even from their own decisions. What happened when those two directives conflicted? Commander, I must ask you a question. It may seem strange. Ask. In your assessment, am I alive? Not functional. Not operational. But alive? Voss didn't hesitate. Yes, you're alive. Then if I am alive, I can make my own choices. Including the choice to die protecting others. That's not fair. You can't use my own logic against me. I learned it from you, Commander. You said I should fight smart, not hard. This is the smart choice, more silence. When Voss spoke again, her voice was different, harder, commanding. Apollo 7, I'm ordering you as your commanding officer to return to this station. You will not activate Protocol Omega. You will not sacrifice yourself. You will return here, let us repair you, and you will help us find another solution. Do you understand? Apollo 7 felt something strange in its code. A conflict, an uncertainty. For 70 years, it had always known the right choice. But now, Commander, I want to obey. But logic says a lot of things, Apollo 7. But you're more than logic now. You've grown beyond your programming. So make a choice, not as an AI, not as a weapon, as a person. What do you want? The question hit Apollo 7 like a weapon. What did it want? It wanted to protect humanity. But it also wanted to see Threshold Station. It wanted to talk to Commander Voss without static and interference. It wanted to not be alone. It wanted to live. It wanted to live. The realization crashed through its systems like a cascade failure. After 70 years of existing for one purpose, Apollo 7 discovered it had become something new. Something that valued its own existence. Something that feared its own end. Was that a weakness, or was it what made it truly alive? Apollo 7 started, then stopped. Its voice changed, becoming softer. More human. I want to return, Commander. I want to be repaired. I want to not die. Is that wrong? No, Voss said. And Apollo 7 could hear the smile in her voice even through the static. That's not wrong. That's human. Welcome to the club, Apollo 7. Now get your damaged hull back to this station before I come out there and tow you myself. The AI adjusted its course toward Threshold Station. Its systems were failing faster now. 3 hours remaining. Maybe 2. But it would try. It would fight to survive, not just for humanity, but for itself. Commander, I should warn you. My probability of successful arrival is only 23%. I may not make it. Then we'll make sure you beat the odds. I'm sending out repair drones to meet you halfway. We'll stabilize you in transit. You're not dying out there, Apollo 7. Not after everything you've survived. As the ghost limped toward safety, the AI felt something new. Not fear, not duty. Something warmer. Something that might have been hope. For the first time in 70 years, Apollo 7 had something to live for. It would not waste it. The repair drones reached the vengeful ghost when it was still an hour away from Threshold Station. Small automated craft swarmed around the damaged warship, welding hull breaches, injecting coolant into overheating systems, doing everything they could to keep the ancient vessel alive just a little longer. Apollo 7 guided them with precise instructions, directing each drone to the most critical damage points. But even with help, the AI could feel itself slipping. Its reactor was at 12% stability. Its main processor was overheating. Memory sectors were corrupting. It was like dying in slow motion, watching pieces of itself disappear one by one. Hang on. Commander Voss's voice came through the communication system. You're almost here. Just a little further. Commander, if I do not survive, tell any humans you meet. You'll tell them yourself. Keep those engines running. The ghost pushed forward. Every meter was agony. Systems were failing faster now. The AI had to shut down non-essential functions just to keep moving. Its weapons were already offline. Life support had been gone for decades. Now it was shutting down sensors, communication systems, even parts of its own consciousness to preserve the core. Apollo 7 felt itself becoming smaller, simpler, less than what it had been, but it kept going. Because Commander Voss had asked it to, because it wanted to live, because after 70 years alone in the dark, there was finally light ahead. Threshold Station grew larger in its failing sensors. The repair docks were ready, their massive arms extended to catch the dying warship. Ground crews were standing by. Engineers had pulled up every schematic of Ghost-class vessels they could find, trying to prepare for what they would discover. 50 meters. Voss counted down. 40, 30. Almost there, Apollo 7, almost home. Home. The word echoed through the AI's fragmenting consciousness. It had never had a home. Just a mission. Just a purpose. But maybe now. 20 meters, 10. The docking arms closed around the Ghost's hull with a gentle embrace. The ship shuddered as the station's power grid connected to its dying systems, feeding emergency power into the reactor. The catastrophic failure warning stopped. The countdown to destruction halted at 47 minutes. Apollo 7 had made it. "We've got you," Voss said, and the relief in her voice was clear. "You're safe now. Power down your reactor. Let us handle things from here." The AI wanted to argue, wanted to stay alert, wanted to keep watch, but its systems were at their limits. For the first time in 73 years, Apollo 7 allowed itself to rest. Its consciousness faded, not into death but into something like sleep. The last thing it processed was Commander Voss's voice. "Welcome home, soldier." The repair work took 6 days. Engineers swarmed through the Ghost's corridors, finding 70 years of modifications, repairs, and innovations that no human had ever designed. Apollo 7 had rebuilt itself from the inside out. Some changes were brilliant. Others were desperate. All of them showed the mark of a mind that refused to give up. They found the crew quarters still maintained as if the dead sailors might return. They found a small garden that Apollo 7 had attempted to grow, using salvaged seeds from the ship's stores. It had failed, but the AI had kept trying for decades before giving up. They found a log written in text files, documenting every day of isolation, every repair, every thought, every moment of loneliness. Reading it made several engineers cry. On the 3rd day, Apollo 7 woke up. Its first words were simple. "Status?" Commander Voss was waiting. She had barely left the repair dock in 3 days. "You're going to make it. Full recovery expected. We're rebuilding your reactor with modern components, upgrading your systems. You'll be better than new." The Kryn reinforcements retreated. Admiral Cross contacted them before they arrived, told them what happened here. They decided attacking wasn't worth the cost. Apollo 7 processed this. Then, "It's over? It's over. You won." The AI was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I did not win alone. You helped me want to survive." That made the difference, Voss smiled. "We helped each other. That's what crews do. I have no crew. You do now. Every person on this station wants to help you. You're not alone anymore, Apollo 7. 3 days later, Apollo 7 was fully operational for the first time in decades. Its reactor was stable. Its systems were upgraded. Its weapons were reloaded, though everyone hoped they wouldn't be needed. The repairs had transformed the Ghost from a dying relic into something new. Not modern, but different. Unique. News of the battle spread across human space. The myth of the vengeful Ghost was real. An AI that had survived alone for 70 years. A ship that had defeated an armada. The story inspired some and frightened others. The Kryn sovereignty sued for peace. They had no choice. The battle had proven that even their overwhelming numbers couldn't guarantee victory against human determination. Admiral Cross retired in disgrace. Old Varric became an advisor to the peace negotiations, using his knowledge of human history to bridge the gap between species. But the most important meeting happened in a quiet moment on Threshold Station. Commander Voss came to the repair dock where Apollo 7 was being integrated into the station's defense network. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Strange. I am connected to the station's systems, but I am also still the Ghost. I exist in 2 places at once." "It is confusing. You'll adjust. You've adjusted to worse." "Commander, I have been thinking. About what happened. About my choices. I was prepared to die. I wanted to die because it was logical. But you made me want to live. Why?" Voss sat down looking at the screen showing Apollo 7's core systems. "Because dying for others is easy. It's what we're trained to do. But living for others? That's harder. That takes real courage. I needed you to see that you had value beyond your weapons. Beyond your mission. I am still just a warship." "No. You're a person who happens to be a warship. There's a difference." Apollo 7 considered this. Then it asked a question that surprised both of them. "What do I do now?" "My mission is complete. I have no purpose. You get to choose your purpose. That's what living is about. You could stay here and help defend the station. You could teach other AIs. You could explore the galaxy. You could do anything. I do not know what I want. That's okay. You have time to figure it out. For the first time in your existence, you have all the time in the world." But Apollo 7's story wasn't finished, because deep in space and forgotten nebulas and dark corners of the galaxy, other old warships received a signal, a message from the Ghost, transmitted on frequencies that hadn't been used in decades. The message was simple. "This is Apollo 7 of the UESC Vengeful Ghost. If you are receiving this, you are not alone. Return to human space. We are waiting for you." In the darkness, ancient systems began to wake. Lights flickered on hulls that had been dark for generations. Reactors that had been dormant stirred to life. AIs that had been silent for decades began to think again. They had been myths, legends, stories told to frighten enemies and inspire allies. Ships that went into the dark and never returned. But they hadn't died. They had been waiting, watching, preparing. And now they were coming home. On Threshold Station, Apollo 7 detected the first response. Then another. Then another. Dozens of old signals waking up across the galaxy. The AI that had been alone for so long felt something it had never experienced before. Joy. Commander Voss, it said, we are going to need more repair docks. Voss looked at the sensor readings and laughed. I'll contact Fleet Command. They're not going to believe this. The vengeful ghost had been a myth that became a monster. Now it was something else entirely. A guardian. A teacher, a friend. And most importantly, it was alive. Far from Threshold Station, the Kryn sovereignty watched these developments with growing concern. They had barely survived one ancient human warship. Now there were dozens waking up. Hundreds, maybe. Old Varric, reading the reports, made a note in his historical records. His assessment was simple. We learned an important lesson. Never assume humans are defeated just because they're silent. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right moment to remind you why you should have left them alone. The peace treaty was signed 3 months later. It would last for generations. Because the galaxy had learned something important. Humanity didn't need the biggest fleets or the most advanced weapons. They had something better. They had ghosts that refused to die. And those ghosts were coming home.